Hello and welcome back to Cinema 104, Film History. Okay, so we're moving into the 50s, and as you can see, I've got the drive-in and the old car behind me. So, as we move into the 50s, America starts to shift, relaxes a little bit from the uptight earlier 50s and the Red Scare. Senator Joe McCarthy is shamed and censored in the Senate. And so that era fades away a little bit, and also we have the emergence of television. And that's what really, really affects Hollywood in this period. Is suddenly now they have a new competitor for entertainment in America. And lots of folks are staying home in their suburban homes watching television. Okay. So, as we saw from the early in the 50s, a lot of Americans were moving into suburbs, moving out of cities. Where are the theaters? In the cities. So what does Hollywood do in response in the 50s? Build drive-ins out in the suburbs where land is cheap, okay? And people could drive in their cars. American car culture was thriving in the mid 50s. So we see films responding to this, and we see what was happening is while the parents were staying home to watch TV because it was comfortable and easy, the kids were going out to get away from parental control. They had money. We had a burgeoning teen culture. Okay, they were given allowance, in some cases cars, as we'll see in Rebel Without a Cause. And they were going out to the movie theater to get away from the parents. And sometimes what they were doing is going to drive-ins where they would see sci-fi like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or a film like Rebel Without a Cause, which stars James Dean, a method actor. Okay, so we see the continuation of method. I think he was 27 when he made this film. He dies tragically before the film's even released, becomes a Hollywood legend on just three films. Okay, all three stars of Rebel Without a Cause actually died tragically. You can read about that in the study guide. But Rebel Without a Cause really captures the teen spirit of the day, and Hollywood begins to realize that their audience is getting younger and younger, and that they need to start appealing to this audience. Now, two films that really didn't do that were Singing in the Rain. So we see the classic studio era. It's made about the silent era in 1927, even though it was made in 50, it's about 1927. You get to see the studio system as it transitions from silent to sound. And that's very interesting. You see the hierarchical control, the long contracts, the way the studio was run like a factory. You see that in that movie. And it's also a classic musical, much beloved. And then with the last film, Ben-Hur, we see what Hollywood also does in response to television. They start making widescreen films and they start making big historical epics. They can't afford to do that on television. Television is mainly shot on sets. So Hollywood has to respond. So it responds primarily with color. Black and white TVs were black and white. Okay, so more films come out in color, and really by the 60s, almost all films are in color. They go widescreen, which we saw with The Searchers, and now we're going to see again with Ben-Hur. And they build drive-ins, and in some cases they added gimmicks like 3D and the Tingler, which you can read about in your study guide. So last word on Ben-Hur, biggest film of the 50s, huge success, but what it did is it tricked the Hollywood studios, the old executives, into thinking that this formula was going to work. And so they began making through the early 60s a bunch of these giant, bloated epics, many of which failed, including Cleopatra, which we'll learn about in next week. So, final note. I'm kind of calling this the end of the studio era, and this ends our unit one. Okay, so what this means is the studio control really starts to slip very strongly in the 60s, as you'll see in our very next week. And this sort of marks the end of a certain era of Hollywood. This sort of era is called post-classic Hollywood, classical Hollywood being before 1945. Okay, hope you enjoyed the lecture. Hope that sets things up well. If you have any questions, please reach out and enjoy the films that I picked for you. There's some good ones.